Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to another episode in our summer series, Camp BNT. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. I'm so happy to be at camp this summer. It just makes me smile.
I am too. I love me a good summer camp. And even if that summer camp is happening in the fall, winter, or spring, we still welcome you all, listeners, to camp. It's very exciting.
I mean, it's exciting. And I think when we originally had this idea, I wasn't sure how it would actually feel in the midst of it. And I really do. I feel like this is a season of the podcast where we've gotten to kind of sit back and take a break from all of the really deep curriculum work that we do and just kind of look at things from a very fun book level. And that's what we love anyway. So it's been really fun to just kind of turn things.
Well, and
books first.
Nerdy teacher fun, right? That's the other thing is it's just lean in, man. We like this. Let's just do it. And that's the indulgence of the summer camp aspect of just don't pretend to be something that you're not. That's what I tell myself anyways. You like to talk to experts and artists and creatives about what they make, then just talk to them about it and dig in and just, lean in.
Lesson learned. I mean, and this is I admit in the interview, and I'm sure y'all heard, this particular one when we're talking with Diana Lopez, I was not expecting to enjoy a middle grade book, period. And the fact that we were able to just sit down and talk with an author again was just such a refreshing conversation. It was stimulating all kinds of creative ideas. And that's exactly what this episode's all about is after that conversation, Marie and I are buzzing with the rest of what we want to do with all of those thoughts. So we're pairing these episodes up together, interview and debrief. And that's what we're going to do today.
Yes. And if you missed last week's episode, make sure that you head back and listen to that one first, because this one, can stand alone and make sense, but it's going to make a whole lot more sense if you listen to our interview first with author Diana Lopez, because we get into a lot of different things about her experience as a middle school teacher and as a continuing education teacher and how she became an author in the first place and where these stories were really born of her own experience as a person growing up and becoming an adult in Texas. And it's so much of it in Corpus Christi, and so much of it is so based in her own experience and her own life and the experiences and the observations of the people around her. So that really enriches the conversation that you're about to hear, which is the two of us taking then her novel, which we both, like Amanda said, Amanda was surprised that she liked. Amanda's surprised when she likes anything that's not, come on. Let's call it what it is. Full stop. No, I'm kidding. No, when she likes anything that's not going to be found in a graduate level seminar on Brit Lit.
Listen, we spent 10 minutes talking about burgers in that episode. I wasn't too highbrow for a good burger.
We talked about Whataburger.
I know, but I see myself. And and that's exactly why we're here.
But I think that's part of your allure, my friend, is that you're more than willing. She just clucks a laugh at me. You are more than willing to be I never think I'm going to like things that are YA. Oh my gosh, I love this. I never think I'm going to like things that are for middle grades. Oh my gosh, and you were I remember you read this before me, and you were absolutely I can't wait for you to read it. It's gonna be so good. Yeah. And then as I was devouring it, my own kid was hey, Mom, are you going to be done with that book soon? Because the cover looks really cool. So it's really like this book specifically is a treat for all ages. So we are excited to dig in and let's do a little unit makeover chat and see where we can see this fitting in. I mean, I can actually see it fitting, spoiler alert, in high school. So I think that's where a lot of my conversation is going to lean, because I think I have some really cool ideas for this middle grades text in a high school.
So before we jump in, there are two places that you're probably going to want to go to kind of supplement this conversation. If you have the luxury of listening to this while you're kind of doing your own little summer PD, first and foremost, you should be joining our Facebook community that's called BNT Summer Camp. It's Camp BNT actually. And to get into our Camp BNT Facebook, you're going to want to head to bravenewteaching.com/camp. So go there, come into camp. We have a lot of great discussion questions and resources and things like that are in camp. The second place you might want to go is to our unit makeover download. It's a free email series that walks you through a much more like clean version of what we're probably going to do today, but kind of a top to bottom unit revision. So if you're looking for those steps and you want to give yourself a chance to rethink a unit, not only will we link other episodes where we've done unit makeovers, but you can get that free, I think it's a 2 weeks, 10 emails
challenge.
Series.
Yeah. Because we wanted to, it's really like 5 full days of work, but we want to do it right and mindfully. Yes. And so we stretch it out over a couple of work weeks. And all of this will be linked in the show notes to this episode as well. So there we go.
So make sure you go to the show notes.
Yeah. Guess what? It's time for cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. All right, Amanda. So I started to tease out the fact that I can really see this book, Felice and the Wailing Woman by Diana Lopez, working in a high school classroom. And you emphatically agreed.
Yes, I did.
That's it. That's the podcast. Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much for coming. Bye, everybody. Okay, so when we're at least we think we're funny.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we never know. We never know if anyone else
really think we're funny. Oh, the other thing that we meant to mention, I am all over the place today. The other thing we meant to mention in our intro is we have an extended episode of the interview with Diana Lopez on Happy Hour. So if you are a member of Happy Hour, make sure that you catch that. And if you are not yet a member of Happy Hour, this might be your month. Join us. Okay.
Well, we talk about your great question about are monsters born or made? That question, we have her kind of tackle in that Happy Hour episode. So it's a really great, juicy extension. So definitely go.
It is a good one. And it brings like this middle grade book to a really high level, because that is a question that in my classroom, we explore Shakespeare. We explore Macbeth and Hamlet through that question. So like talk about upping the ante.
Okay, could we look at Shakespeare as a sort of folktale?
Oh, it's every folktale. Right? I mean, that's what it is.
Okay,
Shakespeare's so much in mythology. How nerdy do you want to get?
Wow. Okay. I'm pulling back, but like,
no, I was ready to like
think about that for a second.
I was going to like snap my suspenders and like really get into it. But I don't know if that's the podcast for today.
That's not today's, but all that is to say, I think that what we're going to do today is going to really poise any teacher with different ways of attacking Felice and the Wailing Woman in their classroom. Yes. You know, I think first and foremost, I do want to address our middle grades teachers. We're so happy you're here. We're so sorry. Our experience is not there, but I think this book is beautiful as a standalone novel unit for your classroom, as a pairing with other folktale kinds of units you might already have, hands down. But I'm definitely not going to sit here and tell you exactly how I would do it with 7th graders. But I wholeheartedly believe it would be an amazing unit.
No, but I think that, like, at least what I have in mind can be adapted and translated to younger grades, because I'm going to talk through it through the lens of like 12th grade. But I can definitely see places where you can make like the skills that you're using or, you know, like working towards and the lines of questioning more appropriate for a younger audience and use the texts that we're about to talk about, I think. So, okay, let's talk through this in a unit makeover style. The first thing that we would talk about when making over a unit or starting one from scratch would be a vision board. We have tons of stuff on vision board. Again, head to the show notes. When you think through a unit with Folktales and specifically this one, right? Felice and the Wailing Woman, the folktale of La Llorona, what comes to mind for a vision board for you?
I talked about this with Diana in the interview. I was very focused on Felice, right? And her character. I really think that the multiple ways that she is straddling so many different worlds and so many different parts of herself, that to me was one of those like indicators of not only are kids going to love it, but kids are going to get it, right? So she's in this kind of family dynamic that's unusual, right? She's being raised by her uncle. Her dad had left. Her mom is this. She doesn't know. Her mom is gone, right?
Right. She's had it. Yeah. Yes. She knows that her mom is no longer with them.
Yep. She's bicultural, right? So she's kind of living in those two worlds, bilingual. As the novel progresses, she's both in the real world and the magical realism fantasy world of this folktale. And I think that something on the vision board for me would be about either bridges or connection or coming of age or something like those kinds of like, I like to throw like terminology and thematic types of words and topics onto a vision board. So I think some of the visuals and the text that I would have on the vision board would be swirling around that.
Do you remember, I want to say it was when I was in my mid-20s, there was a thing like in the scrapbooking realm called a smash book.
I sure do.
I feel like this unit is somehow put together with a smash book.
That would be for those of you cute.
There's just something scrapbook journal-y. And that's really what a smash book is. A smash book is essentially a blank journal where you've got you collect things in your travels and in your days, and you've got this double-sided pen, and one end is a pen and the other side is glue, and you smash things into your book and you write a little note about it. For this, because how old is Felice? Isn't she 12, turning 13?
12.
Yeah. Like I just see her going around with her little emoji, happy face emoji purse, right? That Diana talked about. Like she had one and that's what she kept on her desk when she was writing the novel. I see her with a little mini notebook and some sort of glue, and she's smashing things in there and making notes. And like part of this is her investigation as to finding out really what's happened to her mom. And part of it is just finding friends and places to belong. And that coming of age, all that whole journey to me goes together in some sort of a scrapbook journal. And so my vision board is very much ripped paper and jotted notes and pictures, and she's and the character sketches. So like, I feel like it's all in her sketchbook.
I love that of filling in her sketchbook. Oh,
I know. Well, and then, I mean, my limited knowledge of teaching middle grades is I feel like that kind of a manipulative would go well. My extensive knowledge of teaching in upper grades is that kind of a manipulative would anchor us all to a text in a really nice way. It sounds very labor intensive for a teacher to create some sort of a smash book that kids do throughout an entire unit, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's digital. Maybe it's a portfolio, but we're calling it our scrapbook journal, something, something, something. I just see that theme lasting nicely to be able to bring student connections, like self-connections into whatever they're working on.
I love that.
Thank you.
And then I think on my vision board, if we're to continue this, I think now that I'm kind of going through like my border, I think I I think I would have a line down the middle of my vision board.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would start to kind of like divvy things up on either side. I think that I love the cover. I love the way that the cover is drawn.
Yeah.
And that you have La Llorona, right? Kind of like this ghost at the top. And then you have the kids at the bottom. And how those stories converge in the middle is so cool, because as much as it is a retelling of this folktale, it's really about Felice. And the modern retelling of the folktale is in the background, constantly in the background, but like actual folktale, you know, rears its head maybe 3 times in, you know, in the story.
In context building, right? Yeah. I mean, she's exploring the folktale, but like you don't like directly talk about La Llorona. Oh, it's probably like 5 times where it's like a hit you on the head.
And I think that's what's really cool when we think about this now. Like you kind of mentioned, you know, the younger kids. I think when I think about the older kids, I think about what a beautiful opportunity this is for asking big questions about craft, because what she's doing is not so hard to digest. That we've talked about this before on the podcast too. When you simplify the text, you can ask harder questions about how and why.
Yes, how the sausage is made. Yes,
exactly,
absolutely.
Right.
Well, and I mean, and if
we're probably moving past the vision board now, so I don't want to go too
well,
far.
But at the same time, talking through a vision board is you also are thinking through text. And I mean, we're doing this a little bit backwards in the way that we normally would plan a unit. We would normally do, but sometimes you just have a book or you have a choice of books and you got to pick one, right? And that's the reality of being a teacher. I think going for something that is written for an audience younger, like quite a bit younger than your intended group. One of my selling points is that you can read this book so fast with big kids. Yes. You can read it so fast and so much faster than something that is intended for their age. And that idea of looking at author's craft and that idea of genre and like magical realism.
Yes.
There is no spoiler alert. There is no warning. Here we go. We're going into the magic world now. They're just there and you accept it. Like it just,
right.
There's no questioning anybody's abilities by Felice. Like everything is just what it is. And so I think that in and of itself as a dive into genre is a really good way to get students over that hump of like, wait, what's happening? Because it's so much easier for that. It's so much more accessible. Let's use EduBabble. This is an accessible text by virtually all 12th grade audiences, because that's the lens that I'm looking at. So like, yeah. And you could do it fast and build skills quickly and then jump into something really challenging.
You could treat it like an extended short story. I mean, I think that, and also P.S., you don't have to use the entire piece. I love that the way Diana wrote it, the way she titled her chapters.
Yes.
I mean, yes, it would help to have the context. And yes, we want kids to read things cover to cover. We still want them to have that experience. But if this time around it's pulling excerpts, that's not a hard thing to do with the way that it's written. They're very self-contained little pieces. They've got their own little arcs within each chapter. And I think that's a really cool way of thinking about this unit too, is if your unit is not centered on this particular novel, you're not going to do the whole thing. And I think Marie and I are going to get into this more later. This could be a folk tales and fairy tales unit, right, with an EQ around that. It could be a monsters unit with an EQ centered around that. And then this can kind of just be, this could go from the center to a supplementary very easily, but powerfully. And I like that. So I think about my vision board, if we're really kind of centering Felice and the Wailing Woman, I think that those are some of the things that I would have there for sure. I think the relationships piece of it is really important, like her connections to, there's a lot of characters in this book. Which also surprised me, because that's hard to keep track of if you're an emerging reader, but go get it. Like, that's amazing. So I even kind of see like Felice in the center and then kind of like webs to all her people, and then kind of like how she's bridging, right, the two towns, or where she comes from, where she visits, where she was raised, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I like it. And then I would also throw in like a map, maybe with like a pin on Corpus Christi, Texas. And because it is very specific to place. This folktale is very specific geographically.
To the border, yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk through a possible essential question. And Amanda already like nodded to what she and I had in our very quick side conversation before we started recording, was the unit that I teach and that we have done a makeover of here when we were talking about short stories. I can't remember the episode number, but we'll link it in the show notes, on fairy tales. Mm-hmm. The fairy tale unit, that essential question, the one where I talk about Cinderella, for those of you who have been here for a minute, that unit asks the question, why do we tell stories? Full stop. And so to expand that from fairy tales and into folk tales or into mythology, right? There are a lot of different places you could go. And then I can see almost, okay, well, let's get into that in just a second here. But anyways, I think that the question, I'm like really getting ahead of myself. The question of why do we tell stories is broad enough and can be so specific, because it ties into specifically this story really nicely. It is written around a folktale, right? A story handed down generation to generation. It also, so much of the plot is driven around the stories that these characters have told and been told.
Yes.
And so that is a really nice like connection of the story that you're learning about is the story that the character learned, but maybe it's not quite the whole story or not quite accurate. And so it gives you a lot of different avenues for conversation of the why we tell stories, of the crafting of the stories and the how we tell stories, right? Once you know why you're telling a story, then how you're going to tell it can be kind of woven from there. Yeah. You're nodding a lot. What do you have?
Woven. Okay. So if we've got there's the story, I'm trying to like kind of categorize.
Yes.
Like we did this with our Ruta Sapetti's debrief too. We had the different categories or lanes to go, because we also talked about this in that debrief was right. The only thing we can do wrong is trying to do too much.
100%.
So you are hearing Marie and I very, like, this is actually how I start planning, as I call up a friend and I say, I need to brain dump and just start talking. So you're listening to a brain dump. So we're periodically going to try to, categorize things for you, but this is definitely not pre-planned. So, okay. So we've got that lane of story. I think there's another lane that's maybe, I don't have an EQ for it, but there's a folk tale, legends, myths category. Like that's tighter than story.
Oh, I was like, so stories?
No, I think that there could be something tighter than story.
I feel like I think you're right. I don't know that they're different lanes. I think that they're layers, or like there's umbrella with smaller, I don't know if it's a cone.
I guess I should clarify more of my brain. So I'm thinking there's more of a genre focus.
Sure.
So whereas story is kind of broad about like the philosophical side of story, I think there's also, like we talked about with historical fiction, there's that lane too, I think.
So what if, and then maybe it's looking at a course more holistically of like story and the stories that shape society or the stories that shape our lives or something like that. And then, well, these are the stories that shape culture. These are the stories that shape whatever. And that's where like folk tales, mythology, the stories that shape religion, the stories that shape
ourselves. Memoir, right? Like
yeah.
We just spent a whole year for you. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Watch me go and redo my whole American Lit curriculum. I know.
That would be amazing. Okay.
Pump the brakes on that for a minute. Okay.
Put a pin in that. Okay. So coming of age, I think, is the other lane.
Yes. Okay.
A coming of age lane is really important. And this is something that came up in other interviews, because we are interviewing amazing people who write really good stories. We talked about this with Furia, with Camila. It's her coming of age story. And I talked about an EQ. I think I talked about the one, when does childhood end and adulthood begin? I talked about that with Furia. This one I also like too. To what extent does my childhood define my adulthood?
Oh, that's nice.
And I think for Felice, I think that that would be such a cool question to look at from her perspective, because she refused to let the story she was told about her childhood define her adulthood. She was so proactive in finding answers, and like the clarity that she got through her own sheer force of will, I think is going to make her a more compassionate, thoughtful, fulfilled adult. So I think that'd be kind of a cool lane to go. Yeah.
And I would even say, so I think that would be a nice younger question, but I think I think to age that question a little bit, it could just be, to what extent does my history determine my future?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's probably, I don't know if there's an EQ for it. I don't know if the novel holds it enough, but there's definitely, if this is being used as a supplemental, I really think there's an interesting conversation too around perception and kind of the conflict of the community, right? The town of Tres Leches, and how kind of they're very manipulated in a lot of ways by kind of believing these loud talkers. There's a rhetorical angle here.
There's
right?
definitely a rhetorical angle here.
The political side of what's going on in the town and how they're kind of being, swayed politically, but they've also been swayed to believe in this one story about La Llorona and not ask questions. I think there's not a lot there in terms of like it being the central focus, but so I don't know that I would give any cue
it could
for
still be but see,
it's huge.
I think when I'm looking at story and the stories that shape society, right?
Yeah.
Boom. There you go. That's all rhetoric. That's all political rhetoric specifically. And that's quite a bit in this book, in certain little pockets that you could like really close read and get into. So I know there's like a lot of different ways to go. So
I think I would say my last way I would say is if you wanted to use this with upper high school kids, you could also use this as a great mentor text for a narrative unit.
Oh,
if you wanted to look at author's craft, and like you could definitely narrow it by however you wanted to, but I think this would be a masterclass in the prompt of remake a folktale, retell a fairy tale. Here's how, right? Diana Lopez did it with La Llorona. Let's read it together as a giant, right, mentor text for the project that you are about to embark on.
That could be like a term-long project, right?
Oh, it'd be so cool. And to just kind of look at, like, she talks so much in the interview about where Felice comes from. Okay, well, so there's this question. If La Llorona had a daughter, what would these characteristics be? Well, she's afraid of water. She's been not told the truth about her mom. And she talks a lot about the development of the character of La Llorona and developing her past this kind of single surface existence that she's been given, and giving her dimension, giving her dynamic characteristics and compassion. She's not all monster. She has a backstory of her own. There are so many cool parts of the development of those characters that, man, this whole unit could just forget reading. Let's make this a writing unit.
Well, so then let's talk through. So the assessment, right, summative, would be a retelling of a story, which has been done over and over and over again, but can still, which means that there's room to do it over and over and over again. So, okay, let's say that this is our central text and we are looking at a summative that is a retelling in I don't know how many words, it's, or how many pages or whatever it is. It's maybe a novella. Each kid is writing a novella. And the unit is going to lead us through from the beginning to the end. We're going to start with questions and what ifs and move our way through a writing process where at the end we've got this novella. Sure. This central text. So then maybe the question is something about, to what extent does the way a story is told shape something, or something like that? Something like that gets you into a craft unit.
Craft questions are typically really ugly and clunky, so it would take us a little time to work through that. But
yes.
TBH,
I don't know. I think the question that ends with something was really well done. I'm offended that you didn't like it, but we can talk about that off the air. I'm writing that down in my ledger.
Oops. Okay. You just said ledger.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Embarrassing.
Okay.
And I would also say with that unit, okay, so let's talk about assessment. Like how do you lay that out? How do you lay it out?
What do you mean?
I would begin.
I do it in English because my students are in an English class.
Oh my God. Seriously, Marie. Marie did not have enough caffeine this morning, I don't think. The caffeinated classroom, she is not.
Is under caffeinated.
Okay, so with the writing, if we did writing, I would, and I just got back from Ohio and we talked about this in a PD that I was at. I think we need to start the unit with a blind write. Like you walk in the door and I say, we're all going to read this fairy tale. Then tomorrow you're going to retell it in your own words, like really crappy, something very like the kids are not overthinking. They're just writing it. You kind of push them over the ledge, or you don't even read anything together. You just say, pick a fairy tale, pick a Disney movie, pick something, and retell it with all new whatever. And you give them some kind of BS prompt that they're overwhelmed by and they think is crazy. And you just say, just do it. Then the unit is an exercise in revision. And we're using Felice and the Wailing Woman as we're reading it. We're looking for, okay, what did she do? We're using the book as something to take notes on as writers ourselves. And then we're pausing. So we read a little bit, we pause, we take a look at what some of the craft things were, and then we go back to our draft. And that draft gets improved little by little by little. Because I don't think you have to do it over the course of a term. I think you could do it in 3 weeks.
So I like
but it's
yours.
Not a novella.
That's okay. We are legitimately, okay, spoiler alert, we're going to rewrite my American Lit curriculum. Okay?
I knew this was going to happen in one of these episodes.
This is it. Okay, we're rewriting my American Lit curriculum because I want to take a marriage of what you're saying and what I'm saying. And I want to do the full book. So start off with, come in, here's some folk tales, here's whatever it is. Maybe their choice, like the fairy tale unit I was talking about, and you can, go through. Maybe they're not. And tomorrow you're going to flash write, or you're just going to get on Flipgrid and you're going to tell me a story, or whatever skill it is that I'm looking for, right? Something. And then we're going to read this book together, or we're going to do we're going to watch Percy Jackson, and then we're going to look at, different stories, blah, blah, blah. Then we're going to read this book together, and we're going to read this book in about a 2-week unit, if even, because it is for middle grades and because I'm talking about 11th graders here, maybe even 12th graders. And then, and we're going to do a full blown novel experience with it. And I'm going to, we're going to pull in the research about the story of La Llorona. We're going to pull in research about the time and place. We're going to pull in research about Corpus Christi, Texas. Like, we're going to get real into it and be investigative reporters. And that's going to be a thing that exists in and of itself. But then we're also going to keep coming back to this mentor text and throughout the whole entire course, because throughout the whole entire course, we are going to be going under the guise of, what is America's story and who gets to tell it? What?
Ring a ding, ding, ding. Full circle. We are definitely dancing right now.
Yes. So here's the deal. If you're new to this podcast, what you have just listened to is the ramblings of a mad woman, but they were getting at an essential question that Amanda wrote forever ago. What is America's story and who gets to tell it? And do you even remember the unit makeover? What episode was it that we went into America's stories? It was a long time ago.
It was in the fall of 2021.
Okay. We will link that episode once the two of us can find it in our own archives.
I think it's in the 30s or 40s.
It is an early on podcast episode. Anyways, we dive into a bit of this question, and I have a whole mini unit that's going to get a big revamp.
Well, we were talking about sinners in the hands of an angry God.
Yes.
We talked about Obama's eulogy for John Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a lot. But wouldn't that be a cool overarching, and then you tell a story at the end of it?
I love that on so many levels for your grade level, because I think that takes, and I've always struggled helping teachers think about narrative this way. I really do think if you're going to teach narrative, you have to give them a lot of time to learn author's craft, because I've talked about it before. I've seen narratives as summatives of units that didn't teach narrative. It doesn't work. And it's not fair for the kids. But I think seeing narrative as something that's not this just, I'm telling a story and I can do what I want, but seeing it as something that's intentional. There are deliberate decisions made, and that while fiction, those decisions might not have the kind of consequences that maybe they do when you're trying to snake oil, right, sell somebody on the rhetoric side, but that there's a connection. The deliberate decision making is happening, whether you are writing a memoir about your life, you're rewriting a folktale, or you are trying to sell something. All of those stories, or you're trying to retell how our country was founded. All of those, like the diction, the syntax, all of that is just, it's intentional. And I think students want to dismiss that, and they want to get away with, right, it's my story, I can do what, and yes, it is, and you can, but let's reflect on the intention.
Well, and talking to authors also makes me,
big time,
as a teacher, a little bit more, I don't know, solid in my response of, yes, but to whose characters are you giving truth? Or how is you doing whatever you want, giving truth and breathing life and doing justice by the story you're telling? Because that's what every single author we've talked to in Can't Be NT, in this whole series, has been talking about. The fictional authors anyways, have talked about how their lot, basically, and how their craft is in breathing life into characters. And these characters deserve their truth to be told. I'm like, whoa, right? So.
Okay. Well, have fun playing your new unit. I mean, sorry, thanks, everyone. It happens.
Look what we did. Let's talk about a little, I mean, we've started to get into supplementals, but like there are, even in the small 3-week unit, well, I've already sort of talked about, like, there's research to be done about different tellings of the story. There's, incidences of river drownings. Like, you can get into like current event sort of supplements. You can get into a lot of different things.
Even I talked about it with Diana. I don't know if it was in the episode. I don't know if it was in Happy Hour or if it was in the episode, because I can't keep my brain straight. But I loved thinking about, I had finished her book right before I watched the movie Chupa.
Yes.
And Chupa was so sweet. So if you don't know what Chupa is, on Netflix, it's a retelling of the legend of the Chupacabra, which is also something that happens. Well, it was legendary on the border, similar to La Llorona. And the Netflix movie, there are certainly clips. You could show the whole thing. But I love that it's a child's version, right? Retelling of that story. It takes away the monstrosity of the legend and kind of humanizes it. It does almost all of the same things that Diana does with her book. I think they would be awesome, even paired.
Oh, that would be cool.
Really cool. Because then you have like a film version of what was done.
Yeah.
So maybe your kids could do a script or.
Right.
Or maybe it's just easier to stick to one format. But either way, it would still give them a good vision. It would be a good conversation point to think about it from two different standpoints. But I think Chupa would be awesome. And it was so cute. It was just a really cute movie. So I recommend it.
I like that.
It was adorable.
I like that a lot. All right, friends. Yeah. So we have definitely given you a lot to think about. I know we've bounced around quite a bit, but that is the nature of these episodes because, like Amanda said before, unrehearsed, off the cuff, here we are. And we are excited to hear your thoughts on the things that we've been talking about. So please make sure that you head to bravenewteaching.com/camp and join us in the Facebook group so that we can all share the wealth of our great genius ideas and help inspire each other. Make sure that you head to the show notes for a lot of different things that we have talked about. It'll be a little bit more coherently typed there in case, you're a normal person that couldn't follow what we were saying. Yeah.
And please follow up with us in that Facebook group. We're happy to continue a conversation, unpack it a little further. That's mostly what's happening in Can't Be NT. So come on over and let's do that there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. Come back next week for a whole nother author interview, and then we'll debrief it. And the cycle continues, and we are having so much fun. So we will see you next time.
Bye. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.